Welcome to the Weekend Weekly on the Blue Room. It's just me, Dave, and Paul for this weekend. Ahead of the final game of the season as Everton travel to Arsenal, which thankfully we're able to say that it doesn't really matter too much for us, regardless of maybe we can move up a place or two in the Premier League. I haven't looked at that too much, which is a decent sign. The fact that we don't really care, the fact that we're still a Premier League side. Some good news. I say some good news, some news to talk about in regarding to where we stand with certain players and where we were thinking about certain players. We've looked ahead to a few of them in the coming weeks, and a lot was announced yesterday by the club itself. Um, Start with a couple there, Paul, that I wasn't. It certainly wouldn't be my choice on a couple of them, and the first one that came to mind was Jack Harrison here, and he's there's been quite divisive opinion regarding him. I think this season, in general, I've said many times, I think he's probably a championship level player, which could be quite ironic given the club that he's at. Leeds could well be coming back to the Premier League, and I think that what the club indicated there was they're going to continue that conversation with Leeds. I would imagine that if Leeds aren't the side that comes back into the Premier League, they will be happy to loan him out again. If they do come back, I would think that that is when they wanted him back to continue with them when they get to the Premier League. It seems to me that the club and Kevin Thelwell in what he said, they've made him quite an important signing to get back for the club. Um, I'm not too sure on that because only if it was a loan again would I be content with that, and I think that's pushing it as well. I don't think he's been like many others, I suppose, particularly that good for us. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I generally agree with all that, Dave. Well, when the season starts, I had quite high hopes for Jack Harrison.
Yeah,
I've got a friend who's a Leeds fan. He was saying to me, like, he'd be a really good signing for you, Paul. He's been a really good player for us. So I thought that was quite a positive comment. And initially, at the start of the season, when he got that goal against Bournemouth, he seemed to be shaking up quite well. But for whatever reason, it just hasn't seemed to quite happen for Harrison this
mm,
season. And I think my overriding impression of Jack Harrison is he's an average player. You know, if he leaves us, I don't think it weakens the team particularly. If he stays, he doesn't particularly strengthen the team in
yeah,
any particular way either. So, but given the market we're operating in, I think if he was available on loan, then I think you consider him on a loan option. If it's the case they want money for him, then I think I'd be looking at alternatives. His goals return for midfield is pretty poor, to be honest. And given that our team struggles for goals generally, it'd be nice to have a goal scored in midfielder as an option as well. I think also his I find his decision making quite frustrating sometimes
yeah,
that he'll beat a man and then go back try and beat him again, or you'll lose possession in a promising position. And his final ball, his final cross, his final delivery is never quite as good as what you expect it to be.
yeah.
On the positive side, he never lets the side down. His all-round contribution is good. He never shies away in the game. But if you think of a marquee summer signing for Everton, Jack Harrison certainly is the one that springs to mind.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there's a lot of context that goes around all of these players that we're potentially letting go. I mean, we'll get on to Ashley Young, who's earned himself a 1 year contract as well. I think that's quite a contentious issue that we'll talk about in a second as well. But with Harrison, I think you're spot on in terms of the end product just simply isn't there. I think he gets into positions which are quite decent. I think the way in which he moves, the way in which he presents himself to other players that we have are in decent positions. You look at the Merseyside derby, I actually thought he was quite good.
Yeah.
When he gets the ball into himself, it's then that decision making that I think that's generally why, and many people listening to this might think I'm being a little bit too harsh by saying that I think he's a championship level of player. By that final product, that cross you mentioned there, he has to cut inside, do so on his left. I think there are mitigating circumstances for him in terms of the right back issue that we've had
Mhm.
with Seamus, Patterson, Godfrey more recently. If you're not settled with somebody that create a level of teamwork between two and a decent partnership, I can understand why he's not, hitting the levels at which both he and all of us would want to see with him. Um, but in regards to everything else we have going on, where I do respect and see the angle from the club itself is alternative options.
Yeah.
Yeah, very limited in that, and I think that I've seen that a lot on social media. People saying you've got to bin him, you've got to get somebody better in. that's the go-to asterisk that's near every single comment we can make on him is who else do you go and get?
Yeah.
Who else are Everton able to go and get? And that, I mean, that word loan is, I think, going to be the one that defines us this summer as well. So I think that's why I'm not as overly critical as I would be
No.
of Jack Harrison being our player going forward. And the other thing as well, Paul, what we have there, what alternative could you put in there anyway?
Well, that's it. I mean, I think that we've commented all season about the lack of depth in the squad, but lack of options for Sean Dyche. You know, if you're putting a case for Jack Harrison, you could say, well, at least the manager knows him. He knows what to expect from him. So there's not going to be like an introductory period where we try to see how a player blends in with the squad. He's
Mm,
obviously, he seems to be quite well liked amongst the squad members as well. And I think, if you're going to bring somebody better into replacement, then yeah, that makes perfect sense. But this is, I suppose you could say, this is somebody who Sean Dyche trusts. He's played in a variety of roles as well, hasn't he?
yeah,
Because he had a spell of be like a deep lying forward at one time as well.
yeah,
So I think Dyche likes players who give you flexibility in terms of options and positions of what they can contribute to the team. So I can see from Dyche's point of view why he'd be quite keen in Harrison staying. I think as well. I mean, I think isn't Jack Harrison's mum a big fan of her son playing for Everton as well? So I always take that's a huge positive as well.
yeah.
If
It's
there's
good
family
fun as well,
members,
isn't it? It's really nice to see that sort of thing. I
it
like
says,
that. Yeah,
yeah, because the parents don't have to get involved, do they? But if she chooses to get involved, she always says quite positive things about Jack's contribution, which you would expect, but also about Everton generally,
yeah,
which is always good to hear as well. So I think, as we said at the start of this discussion today, if he leaves, it doesn't break my heart. If he stays, it doesn't upset me. If he's going to come up, I'd be concerned if our limited transfer budget was spent on Jack Harrison. But if he's the loan option, at least lose the playoffs and then championship again, that'd be more than happy to give him another 12 months.
yeah. That's spot on. I'd be uncomfortable with this. I'd be really concerned if we'd spent anything on him, to be honest with you. If we can get him back on loan, fair point, fair enough. It's somebody that doesn't sort of break the bank to be able to do that. I think, even though even though wages we pay people is probably, nearing the red dotted line anyway. I mean, I think then refer back to that point that what else is there? And I think many people who criticize or overly praise players that we've got, i.e. Ashley Young, I think, which we'll talk about now, they're going to be like, well, if we don't have really much money to spend in regards to wages, let alone signing players for any sort of fee that we have to pay an opposing side, then that in itself becomes a real issue, and you have to create a priority of which one of those stays with us or not. And with Ashley Young, probably I don't know what you think here, but I feel as if it's more. It feels like a real a real definition of how desperate we are. Because look, forget his age, and I try to do that all the time. I try to take his age out of my mind when I think about the context of the guy, because he's fit as a fiddle. You cannot deny he doesn't look his age. Let's be fair. He runs fast. Um, there's no stamina issue with him whatsoever, which is credit to the lad. What is he approaching 40 soon? I think. Which is in this day and age, that's impressive to say the very least. Where I see this being the general direction Everton are going in is a completely different matter here. Now, I understand what we again. I'm going to say again, don't mean to sound like a broken record to our listeners here, but again, this is an issue where you're looking at thinking, well, he's the lesser of two evils in regards to what you're able to go and do financially. Um, but having said that, if he was to play as a right, I mean, his versatility is what goes in advantage of him. I think that's what ticks a box for Sean Dyche. But there was a consistent period of time where people just were sick of the lack of performance he was able to give us. You think about when he was sent off at Anfield. You think about some of the reckless challenges he put in, the position in which he's been in. And I look generally in his career, he's been a top class player throughout his career. Lest we forget, you think of him years at Man United, won all sorts of titles at Man United, regular player there. Aston Villa as well. Think back to that time, it was about 15 years ago now, when he scored that goal against us, where he ran the entire length of the pitch when we were trying to win it, and he scored the last minute to win 3-2 for them. the talent he's had's unquestionable. But are we that desperate to keep with him?
I think the simple answer to that, Dave, is yes.
Yeah, yeah,
I don't think that merits any further discussion, particularly. Yeah, I listened to a Barry Horn a couple of weeks ago on one of the radio commentaries saying that someone on the phone, I think, someone asked him about, about Ashley Young, why have we bought him? And Horns kind of said, well, the reason we bought him is because we can afford him. It's not because we
it's a
particularly
good
rate the
point.
player.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's because we can afford them. If they were better, if we can afford better options, we would bring in better options. But given Everton's perilous financial state, he's the only alternative available. Yeah, I mean, I wish my main problem with Ashley Young, you reference his tackling there, Dave,
mm,
is that he still tackles as though he thinks he's 21, as though he
yeah,
thinks he can beat the ball, and he kind of forgets that he's lost that little second of pace of anticipation, and that gets him into trouble, as you saw in the Derby game, and also in the Notts Forest game, where he was lucky not to give away what could have been quite a crucial penalty at that stage of the game. So, and I do have concerns about him as a fullback. In his defence, I suppose you could say that sometimes he's exposed, he's not given good support in that position as well. But I suppose from Dyche's point of view, I mean, Dyche really has a preference for players who he can trust, and he obviously trusts Ashley Young to perform
mm,
for him. I think he had a slightly better second half of the season than the first half, which isn't particularly saying too much. And I'd also say, as you mentioned there before, it's his versatility that you think last season he played midfield, he played left back, he played full back, so he can cover a variety of positions. If his role next season is going to be to come off the bench and shore things up for the final 20 minutes or so, I think I can kind of just about buy into that.
yeah,
If his role is envisaged as him being a regular starter, then I have huge concerns.
mm,
Um, and it also, we've mentioned Nathan Patterson so often on this show, haven't we? This kind of begs questions here. Does Dice have concerns about Nathan Patterson's fitness? Does he kind of think he can't trust him to play week in, week out? Or is it just a simple case that he doesn't rate Nathan Patterson and he sees Ashley Young as a better alternative, which is a worrying prospect, both certainly for Nathan Patterson as well. So I think, to be honest, Dave, if Ashley Young had left this summer, we'd just say, well, thanks, Ashley. We got 12 months from you. You didn't let the team down. Off you go.
yeah.
Move on to
Shake hands
Saudi
and
Arabia.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So, it certainly wasn't a contract extension to get the pulse racing, was it? You didn't think we've got to have Ashley Young here next season, or else we're really going to struggle. But given where we are, given our lack of money, given that our lack of squad depth, you can almost understand. I mean, Sean Dyche might well be of a pragmatic view that the longer this ownership saga drags on, I might not have any money to buy anybody. So therefore, if I've got players here who can keep another 12 months, I'd rather go with them.
that is the caveat there with a player like him. I think you're right. I think if you were to tell me right now that he was playing in advance of 30 odd games, and half of them were starting rollers, I'd be massively concerned with that. I think we'd be in a position where we're talking the exact same thing this time in a year where, we're relieved Everton have stayed up. It's quite a sad thing to say, but this is the most comfortable position we've been in the last 4 years that we've actually stayed in the Premier League. And he fits into that mold. I feel that you wouldn't get you wouldn't be in your conversation if Everton were maybe 3 or 4 positions above where they are now, and on 40 points, let's say 5 or 6 games ago, where you're looking at a genuine mid-table slash probably even looking at a late dash for European football the way it is now, and Europa League conference and whatnot. So yeah, I mean, I get the logic behind that, giving him an extra year, as with the caveat that I really don't want him near the starting 11 when you've got Mikalenko fine on one side, who's been one of our best players all season round. Been one of our best players for quite some time, Mikalenko,
Yeah,
and the
yeah.
consistency you get from him. And then the other side, I think that's really interesting what you mentioned there about Patterson. There's a real difficulty about a young player who looks like he's a really talented one that doesn't it just seems to linger this, and I'm not too sure why, because he seems to be the bottom of that list that can potentially
Mm,
play at right back, and you can see that evidence in the fact that Godfrey got
yeah,
in
yeah,
ahead of him at right back.
yeah.
I'm not too sure. I mean, obviously we heard the issue that may have happened or not happened when they were away in Portugal doing warm weather training and things like that, but he certainly hasn't taken to Sean Dyche's idea of
No.
what he thinks is a decent right back. So yeah, I mean, if it's in mind to keep uh, Ashley Young because you don't really want Patterson. And something else with Patterson as well. I mean, I think the club would look at it, given how desperate we are. You could probably get a decent price for him,
Yeah,
given
yeah.
the reputation he came from Rangers for, and obviously he's there at the Euros with them as well. You know, if he has
Mhm.
a big summer with them, that I imagine Sean Dyche should be looking at, the transfer kitty and thinking, "Do you know what, we can get a few million quid in there for a player that I'm not going to be throwing in the team anytime soon." Um, I want to move on with Idrissa Gueye. He's been offered to extend his contract by a year, I think it is. I didn't read fully on the news. He's accepted that. He's absolutely fine. Does that just continue? Does he hasn't like, oh no, I want to go somewhere else. He's just consistently saying with his extra season, because I actually think that is probably one of the best moves Everton have made to give him an additional year to carry on with us.
Well, absolutely. I think you look at players who really made a massive contribution in the second half of the season. I think Idrissa Gana Gueye is one of the kind of springs to the top of my list because he's kind of buzzing around the midfield, his interception, his tackles, his passing, and not to forget his sudden upsurge in goals contribution towards
Yeah,
the,
yeah.
towards the end of the season as well, with these stunning 25-yard shots from the edge of the box. He's actually having a big impact to the side this season as well. And yeah, I mean, he also brings experience, doesn't he? He knows how to play the game. I always admire him in matches when sometimes he gets a yellow card early on, and you start to worry, but then you won't get another yellow card. He's way, way, way too knowledgeable to fall into that trap again. So I think. Of all the contract extensions, he was the one I was desperate for us to give another 12 months to, because he just brings so much to the team as well. And I think the midfield players, particularly Onana and Garner, benefit when they're playing alongside Garner Gay, because he will sit back and give them license to go forward as well. I think his overall game's improved quite a bit. I know he struggled on the front Lampard, and whether that's because of the road Lampard game or not, I'm not quite sure. Sometimes his passing on the front
Mm.
Lampard was certainly. I've always remember the game against Brighton about 3 years ago, where he set them up for their fourth goal. But since Dyche brought him into his way of playing, into his system, he seems to have slotted into that perfectly. So from Everton's perspective, we're not going to get someone as good as Garner Gay for the money we can afford to pay on players. So basically, I think if Garner Gay hadn't signed another 12 months, we'd be looking at Ashley Young as our midfield kingpin next season.
That makes me feel like we should all of us collectively go down there with a Parker pen and say, please force him to sign it immediately. The other one is the midfield area. Before we go on to players that you might think's more um, controversial, should we say, this season in terms of players that we need to create money from. And you've mentioned one of the names there in Onana and what goes on with him. Andre Gomez, who I've never been the fan that many people refer to in regards to he's got the most amazing hair that anybody's ever seen and all of that, which actually was when he first came in, which is I can't believe it was 6 years ago now. When you think how long it was when he came into the club, obviously had his loan away, came back, can give him nothing but immense credit for how he's looked and put in a massive performance for us in the last couple of months when he's been relied upon by Sean Dyche. Think again somebody else whose level of quality and skill on the ball. Think he's head and shoulders above everybody else that we have. Really, you can see why he was at Barcelona. You can see why he's a top quality international footballer. Um, it's as you know, I think we've said many times on here, Paula, is it's his pace, complete lack of pace that lets him down. He's gone. I think obviously the amount that he was on, his wages in excess of £100,000 that we've seen, it's a no-brainer that he has to go for that. Um, you know, I'd like to have been sort of, a fly on the wall finding out what he was actually offered.
Mm.
Because if he was to take a quite well, let's say at least half the amount that he was
Yeah,
on,
yeah, yeah.
I think that would be a much different conversation than what is led to the problem that we have that he's leaving now. Um, but in terms of a quality that we can go and get, it's in my mind that it's you keep him versus can we get better, and he's very much in the former category for me. And I've had many debates about this with various Blues on social media, and so twixt in between, really. And I would say, given what he's shown us, and I think it's a lot dependent on what's in and around him.
Mhm.
You know, for him to be praised for what is in and around him, I think that's a massive plus point for him because, you know, let's face it, we haven't had the best midfield in regards to the output that we've had this season. But what would you think of him? Are you feeling that that's somebody we should have probably kept on with?
Yeah, I think my views would align quite a bit with yours, Dave. One thing about Andre Gomez is he's by far the most creative player on the team.
Yeah,
He's the one player who can pick a pass out, who can split, who can open up defenses with his probings and passes. And certainly, I think the second half of the season, I think he's had a good second half of the season. He's come off the bench as well. He's done really well off the bench a few times. And even in that 6-0 humiliation by Chelsea, he was the one player who, when he came on, suddenly kept the ball, started finding teammates, and give us a very slight element of control. So I will miss Andre Gomez. I think we'll miss his creativity as well. I remember his free kick goal against Crystal Palace in the FA Cup, probably the best goal seen at Goodison this season. And just generally his all-round play, the way he can find players, makes a massive, brings an added element to Everton's team, which they don't have, because I think we've been moaned a few times the lack of creativity in Everton's side. So I think he will be a loss. And you do wonder what conversation has gone on behind the scenes there. Did they approach him about a possible pay cut about another 12 months? Because certainly there wouldn't be any harm in having that conversation. I suppose from Gomez's point of view, and Gomez's agent's point of view, they're kind of thinking, well, he's early 30s. He's played he's played in Spain, he's played in Portugal, he's played in France, he's played in England. There will be teams interested in his services
absolutely. Yeah,
who will offer him a far more attractive salary than what Everton are prepared to offer. So I guess the truth kind of lies somewhere in between the two, doesn't it? Maybe the club has spoken to him. Maybe Gomez's agent saying, "Look, I can get you this deal, I can get you that deal. You'll be playing every week." So from his perspective, it might make sense to move on. But yeah, I mean, always feel when you look at Andre Gomez's time at Goodison, that tackle from Son that absolutely derailed his career at a time when he was sitting peak form as a player for Everton. You do kind of speculate where Everton and where Gomez's career
mm,
would have gone had he not had to suffer the consequences of a horrific tackle by Son, which kind of goes under the radar still. Compared to other people who get berated for tackles in football in recent
mm.
seasons. So yeah, sad to see Andre go, but on those wages he couldn't stay. And whether we had the conversation about reducing that, I'm not sure. But thanks, Andre, and you did help towards us, staying in the Premier League again this season.
Yeah, very much a sliding doors moment. What you mentioned back there to that Son ridiculous tackle there, which what did my head in after that was like, he's such a nice guy. They're always nice guys. They're always
Yeah,
the best
yeah,
guys you can
yeah,
meet.
yeah,
They're all
yeah,
lovely.
yeah,
They'd
yeah,
all shake your hand after the game. Well, that split second you go and snap someone's ankle.
yeah,
You're not a nice guy, are you? For
yeah,
that, you might well be lovely afterwards. And ironically, he is one of my favourite players, Son. I think he's a brilliant player for Spurs and has been for many, many years. But on that particular occasion, you know, that was ridiculous. That, and like I say, it's a sliding doors moment there. Andre Gomez might not well be with us by now. The ironic thing might well have been because he turned out to continue to be a top class player that
yeah,
somebody else came
yeah,
and bought him.
yeah, yeah,
As we sort of head toward the end here, of the potential look ahead to the summer. We sort of hinted at this when we started doing sort of play of the season podcast regards last week with me, Les and Matt, was on the outgoing side of things. And I'll put my head to the mast here. That I don't think we'll have Branthwaite if we're doing this discussion in about 3 months' time. I don't think Jared Branthwaite's going to be an Everton player, for several reasons. Probably because of the quality he's got versus the fact that we're a side that's effectively going to be one that's in the bottom half of the Premier League table for the considerable future. I don't think that's too negative to say. It's just the reality that it is. The other one is Onana, which I think, I don't know. I think I would think a surprised amount of Blues would think that if given the option, they will probably take the money right now for him for various circumstances, which we'll get onto quite quickly in a second. And the other one is Dominic Calvert-Lewin with 1 year left in his contract. Now, um, just starting with Branthwaite quite quickly, I think you'd be if I'm not a betting man, anymore. But if Gerard Branthwaite was still at Everton when we come our first game in August, I think I'd be winning a fair few quid if I put a pound on that, to be honest with you, because I don't think there's much chance of that being the case.
I think unfortunately you may be correct there, Dave. I'm kind of hoping that A, he doesn't make the Euro squad this summer, and B, if he does, he gets injured in his last game against Arsenal and misses the
Yeah.
Euros, but he's fit again for the start of the season. Because I think if Branthwaite goes to the Euros and he does, end up getting a place in the team, then he's just going to draw even wider attention to himself as well. You kind of look back at the decision Sean Dyche has made as Everton manager. And when we had the summer cleared out last year, his insistence that Branthwaite should stay was probably the best judgment call that he made at that time, because the massive improvements in our defence with that Tarkowski-Branthwaite partnership, it's just been unbelievable. Actually, I went back and looked at some of the magazines for the pre-season predictions of where we would be this season, and at least one or two of them were saying, whisper quietly, under Dyche, this team lets in goals. So actually, mate, no, we don't. We got miles better this season, and that's all down to Branthwaite and Tarkowski's partnership. So going back to your original point, well, sadly, we're not a club that can refuse to turn down mega bucks for one of our better players. So that also leads to the question: if that were to be the case, what do we do? Do we just take the money option, or do we take a money plus player option, or do we know what the ideal scenario would be, Dave? Something like selling him some content with Jar like Barcelona, but loaning them back for 12 months, so we get another 12 months from him as well before he moves on. That would actually be my preferred outcome. But yeah, I mean, we all want to see Branthwaite stay, and I suppose in the background as well, the whole ownership saga. If there were to be this dream scenario where it's new owners come on the scene, the chance of Branthwaite and his agent, the kind of looking at renewing his contract, outline their ambitions for the club. I just think if we can somehow get another 12 months out of Jarrad Branthwaite and get us a new stadium with him having given us last season to go to Park, that'll be such a good outcome for Everton. If we lose him, then I do worry about our prospects for next season, particularly given our lack of finances as well, and particularly if any transfer money from his sale just goes to pay off debts and meet the profitability and sustainability requirements. So yeah, absolutely, he has to stay. But like you, I just had nagging down that if someone comes in with an offer we can't refuse, but we just got to accept it.
It's a crying shame if that has to go straight into the accounts. But the way things are, that's probably is the case. And the other, what you mentioned there, who you put next to Tarkowski, it's got to be Michael Keane, who we still have right now. And as much as we laugh and grin about that, it's probably that would be the reality if it happens again. If they fill back the accounts, then hopefully there's a few quid elsewhere. And we've only got a couple of minutes left here, but just quickly on Onana, if an offer came in for him around about the same amount that we could get back, I know obviously there's a clause where when we got him from, we'll get a certain amount back from when we sell him. Would you take £30 million back if you could from Onana?
I was given the choice to sign Branthwaite or Onana, then it's Onana. It's absolutely no contest. So if we're going to sell one big player this summer, if it has to be Branthwaite or Onana, then to me it just has to be Onana. And I think what we need for Onana ideally is a superb performance for Belgium in the Euros, where his transfer value kind of rockets a bit, and we just end up getting a really good fee for him. And once again, with the caveat that as long as we can use the money that sale generates, and also, I mean, I think the transfer strategy with Onana worked quite well, because you're taking a young, promising player. You haven't played silly money for him particularly, and you knew that if he did well, you could sell him on for a better fee. And that kind of model of spotting young, promising players on the continent who establish themselves in a decent league, give them a Premier League opportunity where they know they prove themselves to get moved to a better club, to me seems quite a good way of managing the situation at Goodison at the moment. So yeah, I mean, Onana, Branthwaite, no contest. Sorry, it's got to be Onana.
Yeah, and just finally, we've got about 1 minute left here. Dominic Calvert-Lewin, he's probably one of the most important, well, if not the most important player that we need to keep with. Because Beto's the alternative, which we've obviously had issues with anyway, but also the fact that Calvert-Lewin, I was delighted that he started playing and firing in towards the end of the season. he can't go for us. I mean, as much as it's a year-long contract, we're pretty much our hands are tied on that for the time being. You can't let him go anywhere, can we?
No, I mean, we talked before about the lack of goals and the Calvert-Lewin. Not only does he offer goals, he creates goals. You saw that last Saturday against Sheffield United. I mean, that was a
Yeah.
brilliant run and chip for the goal from Decore. So, yeah, I think we kind of, when you think of 3 seasons ago, we have quite a potent strike force in Richarlison and Calvert-Lewin. Now, we can't lose Calvert-Lewin as well. He definitely should be there next season. And his all-round, a fully fit Calvert-Lewin is up there amongst the best of the players in the Premier League. So yeah, I mean, he's not that old either. He's still in mid-20s. So I would,
Yeah.
I definitely think he's worth persisting with. Yeah, and it's he speaks like a player who buys into Everton as well. And I think I think his game's improved under Sean Dyche as well. I think Dyche has managed his fitness concerns excellently. He's brought them back in at the right time. He hasn't risked them when it's not been worth taking the chance to do so. So yeah, I think Dominic has to stay.
Spot on, mate. That's an incredible analysis. Spot on in 1 minute's time. No doubt. Obviously, we've got the last game against Arsenal, which hopefully it's. I think I'm going to be doing it with Les and with Warren after the game on Sunday. Which we'll continue to look back on what's happened through the season, and we can all calm down, put our feet up, and then start worrying about August from maybe the day after as well. But no doubt, Paul, I'll be speaking to you next week about a little bit more extensively about what we're going to be looking at towards the summer. 1 season left at Goodison as well. And I know I keep saying this to you, but I do need to have a good chat with you about that, which no doubt I will. I'll give you a call about that anyway. But thanks so much. It's been a Saturday morning weekly, the last one pre-match for Everton this season. No doubt we'll continue throughout the summer as we always have. Do stay in touch with us, and there'll be more from me, more from Paul, more from everybody else going forward. Up the Toffees for one last time away at Arsenal on Sunday. Thanks for listening.